Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. Dusk had bled fully into night when the laughter began, disrupting the quiet ritual of my solitary meal, some reheated pasta forgotten on the counter. It wasn't merely sound, it was a presence, a guttural tremor that vibrated up through the floorboards from the cellar below. My fork slipped, striking the plate with a sharp clink. The cellar sealed for 6 years. Out here, swallowed by 40 acres of whispering pines, 4 miles separating me from the nearest soul. Such sounds were aberrations, impossible. Motion deserted me. I remained frozen at the table, the hum of the overhead bulb suddenly intrusive. Then it rolled upwards again, that laughter, louder now, undeniably male, coarse and untamed. A tremor started in my hand, a cold dew slicking my brow. The food in my mouth became tasteless grit. 12 years I'd inhabited this house. 6 years since Eliza, since the padlock clamped shut on the cellar door, imprisoning her world. The canvases, the scent of turpentine, the spectral forms of unfinished paintings. Grief had turned the key, burying it deep within my nightstand's clutter, untouched until now. Again, the sound ricocheted through the silent house. My heart hammered a frantic drum against my ribs. Shoving back from the table, the chair's legs shrieked against the worn floorboards. A violation of the stillness. Is anyone there? The question, thin and reedy, dissolved into the waiting quiet. Only the house replied, timbers groaning, wind worrying the window panes. Familiar dialogues, but the mirth below. Alien, impossible. My own legs, strangers to me, carried me toward the cellar entrance. The heavy brass padlock gleamed dully, its surface filmed with the patina of undisturbed years. Intact, unscarred. Yet, as I watched, another wave of laughter surged, and this time, tangled within it, the cadence of speech. Indistinct, ancient-sounding syllables vibrating the very planks beneath my feet. Bile rose. The key, I had to know. Necessity propelled me upwards, feet pounding the staircase 2 steps at a time. It lay where memory insisted, nestled in the top drawer, shrouded in a faded linen handkerchief, Eliza's monogram barely visible. My fingers, clumsy and shaking, fumbled with the cloth. As I unwrapped the cold metal, the sounds from downstairs intensified, coalescing, not one voice, but many. A bizarre conviviality, a spectral gathering unfolding directly beneath my home. Clutching the key, a small cold talisman against the impossible, I descended. The murmur of voices swelled, syllables brushing the edge of comprehension before dissolving back into unintelligible chatter. Before the door, I paused. The padlock felt frigid, heavier than mere metal. My hand betrayed me. The key jittered, falling twice to the floor with metallic complaints before finally slotting home. The click of the tumblers yielding echoed profound and irreversible. Police? Tell them what? Laughter in a sealed tomb? Madness. I slid the heavy lock free. My hand closed around the doorknob. It fought back, stiffened by years of silence, then surrendered with a prolonged groan. The door swung inward, exhaling a breath of trapped time, dust, decay, the scent of abandonment. I slapped the switch. A naked bulb flickered weakly, casting a jaundiced glow down the wooden steps into the waiting abyss. Down here, the disembodied conversation gained texture, bouncing off unseen concrete walls. Still, the words themselves remained elusive, a phantom language. My feet, disconnected from conscious thought, carried me downward, one step, another. Each tread protested with a weary creak. Cold sweat traced paths down my spine. My breath hitched, shallow and fast. Halfway into the descent, I froze. Silence slammed down, absolute and suffocating. My knuckles whitened on the railing. Hello? My voice fractured, swallowed by the void. Who is down there? The response was instantaneous. An eruption of laughter, savage, manic, utterly deranged, exploding directly beneath my feet. The bulb overhead spasmed, shadows leaping like grotesque puppets. I recoiled, scrambling backward up the stairs, heel catching, sending me sprawling with a cry as pain flared in my elbow. The laughter pursued, a tangible wave crashing over me. Heavy footfalls thudded on the steps behind. Terror lent me speed. I lurched to my feet, reached the top, slammed the heavy door shut. The frame shuddered. My fingers scrabbled with the padlock, dropping it once, twice. The knob twisted violently. Something slammed against the wood from the other side. The door bucked. Finally, agonizingly, the shackles slid home. The lock clicked fast. I stumbled back, chest heaving. The assault on the door continued, shaking, rattling, then ceased as abruptly as it began. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the frantic rasp of my own breathing. Adrenaline surged. I fled to the kitchen, snatched the phone, stabbed at the emergency number with trembling digits. 911, state your emergency. My cellar, I choked out, words tumbling over each other. Someone's in my cellar, locked for years. Laughter, voices, they tried to break out. I relayed the address, the isolation, the impossible breach. Deputies are en route. The dispatcher's voice was a calm anchor in the chaos. Remain on the line. Are you secure? Kitchen, cellar door. It's locked again. Even as the words left my mouth, a new horror began. A dry, skittering sound. Scratching from within the walls. ETA is approximately 15 minutes, she continued. Do you hear anything now? The scratching intensified, multiplied, a sound seemingly radiating from every direction. The walls beneath the floorboards, overhead, a legion of unseen things burrowing through the very skeleton of the house. Scratching, I whispered into the phone, the sound barely audible, everywhere, inside the walls. Sweet heaven. The kitchen light flickered, fluttered, died. The phone went dead in my hand, plunging me into absolute blackness. The scratching ceased. Silence, then breathing. Slow, wet, guttural breaths, impossibly close, seeming to emanate from the darkness all around me. And the laughter returned, intimate, directly behind my ear. Blind panic, I bolted, colliding with a wall, hands scrabbling frantically until they found the familiar contours of the front door. Wrenching it open, I plunged into the frigid embrace of the night. Distant strobing lights, red, blue, pierced the darkness, crawling up the long, winding drive. I stumbled off the porch, collapsing onto the sharp gravel below. But the laughter wasn't contained. It spilled from the house now, a torrent of mad glee pouring from every window, every open door, every crack in the structure, now interwoven with shrieks and ululations no human throat could produce. tires screamed on gravel as a cruiser fishtailed to a halt. Uniformed figures spilled out, firearms raised, torchlight slashing the oppressive dark. "Stay back!" My voice was raw. "Don't go near it!" As if summoned, the house convulsed. A deafening cacophony erupted. Every pane of glass exploded outwards in a glittering rain. The very walls seemed to pulse, to swell. The front door tore from its frame, hurled into the night. And from the gaping maw poured darkness, not mere absence of light, but a tangible, coiling blackness that writhed and chuckled. It ascended, a column of living shadow against the starless sky, coalescing. Visages flickered within its depths, nightmare faces leering, multi-eyed, mouths brimming with needle teeth. Gunshots cracked, muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the officers' stances. The bullets vanished into the shifting void without effect. The faces merely laughed, louder, wilder. Then silence fell like a hammer blow. The darkness dissolved. The laughter evaporated. The night was still, save for the thrum of idling police engines. The cellar, when breached by cautious officers and a trembling me, was utterly still. Dust lay thick and undisturbed, save for my own footprints ascending the lower stairs. Eliza's sanctuary remained frozen in time. Easels draped in cobwebs, jars of dried pigment, the faint chemical ghost of turpentine. Yet a violation had occurred. Her canvases, the ones bearing the nascent forms of her final works, were starkly, impossibly blank, wiped clean, as if the images themselves had been devoured, leaving only sterile white rectangles. The official investigation yielded nothing. No forced entry, no squatters, no rational cause. They documented my incoherent testimony, swept the woods with flashlights, and filed a report mentioning potential environmental factors, perhaps faulty heating causing vivid auditory and visual disturbances. I offered no counter-argument. How does one articulate the sight of living darkness or the testimony of empty canvases? The truth resided there, in that sterile void where Eliza's art had been, and in the phantom resonance of that abyssal mirth. I secured the cellar door with a new padlock, heavier than the last, then hurled the key deep into the surrounding pines. A single bag packed, I sought refuge in the anonymous sterility of a motel room. The house went on the market the following morning, yet escape remains elusive. Sleep offers no sanctuary, only replays of that wild, deranged laughter, and sometimes woven beneath it, a sound far worse. Eliza's voice, thin and desperate, screaming my name across an unseen distance. I never returned. Some thresholds should never be crossed again, some mysteries best left entombed. But the silence is a lie. That which resided beneath my home, that which feasted on color and light, is not bound by walls or distance. The laughter stalks the edges of my hearing, drawing nearer with each passing night. I sense a convergence, an inevitable reckoning where the secret of the blank canvases, the truth of Eliza's past, and the nature of the patient horror in the cellar will be laid bare. I only pray I endure the unveiling. A dissonance struck me the instant I crossed the threshold into the living room that morning. Ghostly shrouds of plastic draped every furnishing. The walls, scarred and half denuded by the renovation, stood like exposed flesh. Yet beyond the disarray, an intrusive chill permeated the air, a coldness that hadn't belonged there yesterday. Milo, the tradesman I'd contracted, beckoned me over, his gesture curt. He indicated an anomaly, a stark, circular orifice punctuating the wall. It was an utter novelty, absent from any blueprint, absent from the previous day's reality. Its existence defied explanation. Roughly 3 inches in diameter, its perimeter possessed a quality that pricked at my unease. Chipped, yes, but unnaturally so, as if the plaster itself had organically fractured, birthing a crude mouth overnight. I stood rooted, attempting to mask my disquiet from Milo. He was older, his hands bearing the testimony of labor, his gaze steady, unperturbed. "Never laid eyes on the like," he stated flatly, his tone assured. "We'll seal it up come tomorrow." I offered a mute nod, words failing me. A subterranean current of tension, however, refused to subside within me. Drawn by an unseen cord, I approached the opening, pressing my palm flat against the surrounding plaster. Colder, distinctly colder than the ambient temperature of the room. Merely a draft insinuating itself from some hidden crevice, I rationalized. Milo then obscured the hole with a length of sturdy tape, reaffirming his intention to deal with it definitively. Shortly after his departure for the day, I endeavored to resume some semblance of normalcy. As twilight bled into night, I found myself cocooned on the sofa amidst the renovation's chaos. Navigating the landscape of paint tins and the skeletal form of a ladder was a prerequisite for reaching the kitchen. The living room languished in dimness, 2 bulbs having been removed earlier, leaving the space vulnerable to the street lamp's fickle performance outside. Shadows writhed and elongated across the walls with every flicker. I sought refuge in the flickering inanity of late-night television, but the very instant silence reclaimed the room upon switching it off. A sound surfaced, muffled, initially negligible, like wind sighing through a constricted passage. I held my breath, poised, dismissing it. Then it recurred, amplified, disturbingly akin to someone murmuring my name. Julian. A paralysis seized me. My heart commenced a frantic drumming against my ribs. My gaze locked onto the taped wound in the wall. The adhesive held, yet its edges seemed minutely loosened, hinting at some internal pressure. Rising, I drifted closer, compelled until I could press my ear flush against the taped plaster. Silence then, breathing, heavy, labored respirations, or so my straining senses interpreted. A desperate urge to rationalize warred within me, but my name whispered forth again, indistinct yet unmistakable in its syllabic shape. A hushed entreaty, my scalp tightened reflexively. I recoiled, stumbling back into the living room's center, adrift in indecision, hallucination, stress-induced phantasm. Renovations unravel routines, cultivate chaos. The mind, perhaps, simply contorts under duress. Yes, check for a draft. Some explicable phenomenon. With trembling fingers, I peeled back the tape. The aperture seemed subtly dilated, perhaps closer to 4 inches now, though certainty eluded me. Hesitantly, I leaned in again, ear poised near the void. A sudden exhalation of frigid air struck my face and neck, visceral, invasive. I shuddered, retreating several steps. This cold felt alien, a violation within the familiar confines of my home. And then the voice manifested once more, shedding its ambiguity. "Julian," it called, followed by 2 words chillingly clear. "Help me." My hands began to shake uncontrollably. The discarded strip of tape fluttered from my grasp to the floor. "Who's there?" I whispered the query fragile in the charged silence, not truly anticipating a reply. My own voice trembled, a relentless thumping pulsed in my chest. The room felt immense, void. My question hung, suspended. Then, soft yet urgent, the reply, "I need you to come closer." My eyes darted around the shadowed room, seeking a hidden observer, but I was utterly alone. Yet the voice, it resonated with an impossible proximity emanating from directly behind that plaster membrane. "Breathe. Calm down." I took a tentative step forward, leaned in with excruciating slowness. Tentatively, I extended a finger into the opening, probing for a draft source, a hidden conduit. My fingertip encountered something cold, damp. A faint current, like a subtle inhalation, seemed to tug at my skin from the other side. I snatched my hand back, wiping it instinctively on my jeans, adrenaline singing through my veins. My breath came in ragged bursts. "How did you get in there?" A ludicrous question born of sheer incomprehension. "I've been stuck here," the voice returned, laced with desperation. "Please." My gaze swept across my disrupted apartment. Who could I possibly call? The police? Another contractor? The sheer strangeness of it felt insurmountable, impossible to articulate without sounding unhinged. "There's someone trapped inside my wall," I imagined saying, picturing the disbelief, the dismissal. No, better to understand more first. Leaning closer again, I asked, "What do you need me to do?" The response was faint, fragile. "Keep talking to me, don't leave me." A profound conflict churned within me, nascent compassion tangled with primal fear. The desperation was palpable, achingly human, yet the physical impossibility gnawed at my reason. A hidden crawl space, an old service shaft. The building wasn't ancient. That section of wall was documented as solid concrete. For the next hour, I remained tethered to that spot, speaking into the void. My questions about its predicament yielded nothing but renewed pleas for rescue, denials of knowledge. It clung to my name, offering thanks each time I mumbled reassurance that I wouldn't abandon it. Tension coiled in my shoulders. My eyes scanned the periphery, half expecting some other manifestation. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, the hole continued its expansion during our exchange, perhaps gaining another inch. The edges crumbled spontaneously, small flakes of plaster whispering to the floor. No tool, no visible force. It simply happened. Intermittently, a low, grating sound scraped through the wall like fingernails dragged across rough stone. Weariness began to set in, deep and bone-aching. The day's stress had curdled into this nocturnal horror. I informed the voice of my need for rest. A low whimper answered a desperate bargaining. "I'll come back," I promised, "in the morning." A current of profound unease vibrated through my entire being. I left a single dim lamp burning in the living room, a feeble sentinel against the unknown, before retreating to my bedroom and engaging the lock, a mechanism that had never before felt remotely necessary. Tonight, its click offered a fragile shield. Sleep was a shallow, tormented affair. Each descent into darkness conjured images of the hole yawning wider, disgorging something into my home. 4 times, perhaps 5, I startled awake, convinced of furtive footsteps padding down the hallway just outside my door. Dawn arrived with a throbbing headache and trembling limbs. Steeling myself, I ventured back into the living room. The hole gaped, undeniably larger now, a good 6 inches across, revealing not just shallow drywall but a deeper darkness, the suggestion of a tunnel. Retrieving a flashlight from a kitchen drawer, I directed its beam into the aperture. The light penetrated only so far, illuminating a passage receding into blackness. Concrete, stone, impossible to tell. The voice remained silent. I called out its name, my own. Nothingness answered. My day unfolded under a pall of distraction. Milo texted. A family emergency had arisen, delaying his return until the following day. I paced the confines of my apartment, the hole drawing my attention like a morbid magnet. By late afternoon, faint tapping sounds commenced from within. Light, rhythmic, exploratory. Crouching, I pressed my ear close once more. The familiar chill kissed my skin, tensing every muscle. Then the voice returned, softer, subdued. I'm still here. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me. Who are you? I demanded again, the question raw. A pause stretched. I don't know, it replied, the quiet admission more chilling than any scream. Ice traced a path down my spine. I stared into that Stygian recess, my pulse a frantic drum against my temples. I only know, the voice added, I need your help. No further explanation offered. Frustration flared. I can't pull you out if I don't know where you are, I exclaimed, stepping closer. The hole's edges were jagged now, sharp. Plaster dust and small chunks littered the floorboards beneath it. Please don't leave, was the sole reply, the tone weaker now, fading. A resolve hardened within me. I had to see, to reach further. Rolling up my sleeve, I carefully inserted my arm into the opening, pushing inward until my elbow crossed the threshold. The interior was profoundly cold, damp, the texture under my exploring fingers gritty like rough-hewn stone. My fingertips brushed only void. I couldn't discern an opposite wall. Ignoring the rising discomfort, the sheer wrongness of it, I pressed deeper. Suddenly, a fleeting contact, something brushed against my hand. Ephemeral, light, unnervingly like another hand attempting to grasp mine. I yanked my arm back with a choked cry, breathing heavily. Gooseflesh erupted across my skin. I stared, heart hammering at the hole, half expecting a pale limb to emerge. Nothing. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, making me jump. A friend checking in. I fumbled for words, mumbled something about being preoccupied, disconnected quickly. When my gaze returned to the wall, the aperture had widened further, perhaps 8 inches now. More debris lay scattered like macabre confetti on the floor. The expansion, slow but inexorable, rendered Milo's temporary patch irrelevant. Action was imperative. Evening descended again, reclaiming the apartment with its creeping shadows. The voice regained its urgency, its pleas becoming more frequent, more desperate. It called my name. Julian, interspersed with fragmented cries of help, help, and mournful complaints. I'm cold. Pity warred with terror. I rapped my knuckles against the adjacent walls, listening for hollowness, any hint of a hidden corridor. Solid. Everything felt structurally sound, belying the impossible space that had manifested. The situation defied all logic. From my toolkit, I retrieved a crowbar. Perhaps if I widened the hole myself, removed more plaster, clarity would follow. A sliver of fear warned against unleashing something truly monstrous, yet the voice's pitiful persistence eroded my caution. I tapped the wall near the opening. "I can feel you," the voice whispered, making my skin crawl. I began to pry at the edges. Plaster chunks rained down, revealing more of the dark interior. The flashlight beam now showed a narrow passage, extending several feet back before curving sharply out of sight to the right. A gust of wind erupted from the hole, hitting me full in the face. It was bitter, glacial, far colder than before. Involuntary tears sprang to my eyes from the shock of it. My teeth began to chatter. "Can you come closer to the opening?" I asked, my voice tight. No response. I tried again. Only a long, drawn-out exhalation answered, like a weary sigh, disturbingly close, perhaps only a foot from the entrance. Leaning in, sweeping the flashlight beam, I saw it. The indistinct shape of what looked horrifyingly like a pale shoulder. A mere glimpse before it retreated deeper into the shadows. I froze, then sank back onto the floor, legs suddenly weak. The presence was real, physical, or at least possessed physicality, not imagined. I sat there for a long moment, grappling with the implications, unsure of the next step. "Don't leave me alone," the voice pleaded. My heart hammered against my ribs. I realized I was slick with sweat despite the penetrating cold. "I'm here," I managed, my voice strained. I don't know how to help you yet." The next hour was a blur of tense activity. I attacked the wall with the crowbar, then resorted to a smaller hammer, chipping away more plaster and underlying material. The hole grew wide enough now for my arm and shoulder. Dust filled the air, catching in my throat, stinging my eyes. I coughed, blinking away grit. The passage inside looked like a crude tunnel snaking away to the right. The voice urged me onward. "Come in." But the opening remained too small for my body. I needed more leverage, a sledgehammer perhaps. Yet worries about structural integrity warred with the desperate pleas. What if I brought the whole wall down? Calling Milo seemed pointless now, deep into the night, and he wasn't due until morning. I stared at the breach I'd created, almost large enough to crawl through. The voice was so near I could almost feel its breath on my face, a bizarre mingling of intense cold and something else. Stale, musty. My stomach churned. My mouth was painfully dry. "I'll get a better tool," I told it, my voice hoarse. "Hang on." But as I rose, intending to fetch the heavy sledgehammer from the hall closet, the voice cried out again, laced with sudden panic. "Hurry, Julian, it's closing!" I spun back. Did the edges seem to shimmer, tremble, as if the structure itself were unstable? Placing a hand beside their opening, I felt a fleeting warmth, instantly replaced by the pervasive chill. My mind reeled. Panic surged. I ran to the closet, hefted the sledgehammer, and returned. The hole didn't look demonstrably smaller, but an undeniable urgency pulsed in the air, echoed in my own chest. I swung the hammer, connecting with the edges. Concrete dust and small chunks flew. Again. My arms screamed with the effort. After only a few impacts, but the gap widened, large enough now to squeeze through if I crouched low. Hesitantly, I thrust my head into the newly expanded space. The air turned instantly, bitingly frigid. My breath plumed in visible clouds. Forcing myself forward, half crouched, I pushed inside up to my waist, flashlight beam cutting weakly into the oppressive dark. The passage immediately curved right, just wide enough for crawling. The walls felt rough, crudely carved. My pulse roared in my ears. The voice, intimate now, insistent, called, "This way." A strange magnetism pulled me forward, even as every instinct shrieked for retreat. My flashlight beam flickered, threatening to fail. The cold was becoming unbearable. My teeth rattled violently, my fingers turning numb. I dragged myself a few inches further, my back scraping against the rough-hewn wall. Then a sound, louder than before, a heavy, grating scrape echoing all around me in the confined space. A thick, syrupy dread flooded my stomach. Images of the wall collapsing behind me, trapping me, flashed through my mind. Could I even turn around in here? That was when I felt it, the lightest, most ephemeral touch upon my shoulder. I jerked violently, nearly fumbling the flashlight. Its beam swept wildly, illuminating nothing but the rough tunnel walls. No one there, yet the presence was undeniable, suffocating. The voice whispered mere inches away, "Thank you." So close it felt spoken directly into the shell of my ear. My skin prickled horribly. "I can't see you," I cried out, my voice cracking. "Where are you?" "Here," it responded, and I felt another faint brush against my arm, a subtle pressure as if guiding me deeper. My control fractured. Breath ragged, body slick with cold sweat, shaking uncontrollably in the crushing confinement. I knew I was at my limit. I had no plan, no way back if things went truly wrong. "I'll come back," I gasped, the words torn from me. "With someone else. I need help." The voice erupted in raw panic. "Please, no! Don't leave me alone here!" My flashlight beam wavered on the impenetrable darkness ahead. My heart felt bruised, battered against my ribs. I began the awkward, scraping process of backing out, my shoes scrabbling for purchase. "No, don't go," the voice pleaded, rising in pitch, desperate. But I forced myself backward, inch by painful inch, driven by sheer animal panic. Finally tumbling back out into the relative vastness of my living room, I gasped for air, sweat, and plaster dust stinging my eyes. The hole in the wall yawned before me, a raw wound revealing the impossible passage. I collapsed onto the floor, slumping against the plastic-draped couch, the heavy hammer still clutched in my trembling hand. My body shuddered with reaction. From within the wall, the voice continued to call my name, weaker now, more sporadic but persistent. I stayed put, unable to move, unable to force myself back toward that chilling void alone. No logic could contain this. Something resided behind the ordinary plaster of my apartment, something ancient or alien, and it claimed to need me. Or perhaps it simply wanted me. I resolved then to simply wait. Wait for Milo, wait for morning. I sat there in the dimly lit chaos of my living room, the cold emanating from the hole, a palpable presence, trying to regulate my breathing. My gaze remained fixed on that gaping portal. Occasionally, a shadow seemed to flicker within its depths, or a fresh gust of frigid air would sigh into the room. The voice called less frequently as the hours crept by, but it never fell completely silent. It remained a quiet, persistent echo of my name, Julian. as if I were its only anchor in whatever abyss it occupied. Sleep was unthinkable. I just gripped the hammer, stared into the darkness within my wall, and waited for the dawn. Ordinarily, the ribbon of asphalt unfurling beneath my tires is a familiar comfort, a necessary conduit for the life I lead. Elias Thorne, journeyman of sales, chasing horizons for dawn appointments. The nocturnal miles are my domain. But tonight, a dissonance hums beneath the surface calm, a disquiet settling deep in my gut. My car, usually a steadfast companion across state lines, feels alien. I've weathered breakdowns, navigated deluges, witnessed the bizarre theater of midnight rest stops. Yet nothing prepared me for this insidious crawl through the dark. My palms slick the wheel, a knot tightens low in my belly. The dashboard clock advances, digits clicking over with sterile precision. But time itself feels viscous, stagnant. I am moving, yet fundamentally stuck. Hours dissolve into the void. The highway stretches ahead, a desolate corridor carved by my headlights through absolute black. Outside that cone of light, nothingness reigns. An occasional pair of opposing beams flares past, ghosts vanishing instantly. But kinship, another traveler sharing my direction? None for an age. The radio offers only a fractured dialogue of static, phantom stations whispering and dissolving like smoke. Silence dominates, save for the hypnotic drone of rubber on road and the sudden, violent shoves of wind against the chassis. It began subtly, around the second hour past midnight. A landmark pierced the monotony, a skeletal tree, stark against the void to my right. Tall, gnarled, its silhouette unforgettable in the otherwise featureless expanse. A flicker of unease, a shiver tracing my spine, dismissed as fatigue. I pressed on. 30 minutes elapsed, measured by the stoic clock. Then, impossibly, the tree reappeared. Identical. Same tortured posture, same height, same shattered limbs clawing at the starless sky. Weariness, I reasoned, painting phantoms on the canvas of the night. I drove onward, refusing the urge to stop, clinging to logic. Then a road sign canted sharply askew, its face marred by faded looping graffiti. Noted, passed. 20 minutes later, it loomed again. The same angle, the same spectral scrawl, irrefutably identical. A cold fist clenched around my stomach. I leaned forward, knuckles white on the wheel, scanning the impenetrable darkness flanking the road. My headlights sliced barely 30 feet into the gloom. Slowing, my gaze dropped to the fuel gauge. Odd. Just over half a tank remained. Impossible. I'd burned through far more miles than that modest dip accounted for. The needle hadn't just moved slowly, it seemed defiantly frozen. Instead of relief, a fresh wave of dread washed over me. My chest constricted, fingertips turned to ice. The rear-view mirror reflected only an abyssal emptiness, the road behind seemingly devoured. Forward, the only imperative. An exit, a truck stop, any beacon of light and humanity that became the singular goal. Yet the miles spooled out, marked only by the returning specters. The dead tree, the leaning sign. Now a new element joined the rotation. A downed utility pole, its metallic crown twisted like scrap, lying inert on the shoulder. The third time it materialized, raw panic surged. My breath hitched, shallow and fast. The radio sputtering static became an irritant. I silenced it, plunging the cabin into a near vacuum filled only by the engine's thrum and the hiss of tires. My phone, retrieved with trembling fingers, displayed 0 bars. No signal. A call to my supervisor died instantly. Texts remained unsent, unreceived, useless. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. Time warped. The clock read 3:12 a.m. An eternity later, I glanced again. 3:41 a.m. It galloped forward, yet my journey felt like treading water. Surely a town should have surfaced by now. A diner bleeded neon into the night. Nothing. Only the relentless loop, the highway, a Mobius strip of desolate landmarks. My eyes burned, gritty with lack of sleep, or perhaps unshed tears. I forced myself to blink, cracked the window. A chill breeze slapped my face, carrying the scent of asphalt and dry earth tingling my skin. Then a new wrongness. A vibration pulsed through the steering wheel, a peculiar, intermittent shudder, like a tremor deep within the car's bones. It wasn't the engine, it ran smoothly, temperature stable, no warning lights flared. I eased off the gas. The shudder paused, then resumed. A rhythmic, muffled thump, thump, thump from beneath the floorboards, almost like a deliberate tapping. My shoulders bunched. A lump formed in my throat. Ignoring it proved futile. Every few seconds, the dull impact resonated through the wheel, a disquieting heartbeat from the chassis. Pull over? The thought was terrifying, stranded if the car truly failed. Yet the engine hummed reliably. The fuel gauge remained mocking, stubbornly fixed near half. Miles accumulated, fuel miraculously unspent. The spectral landmarks cycled, tree, sign, pole. 5 times now? 6? My breathing grew ragged, sweat cooling unpleasantly on my skin, shirt clinging. Turning back felt like madness, reversing into that consuming darkness, on a road that defied physics. Besides, the rear-view mirror offered only that profound, unnatural black, as if the tarmac ceased to exist just beyond my trunk. Weakness seeped into my arms, a tremor starting in my legs. Frustration boiled over. I slammed a palm against the wheel, the sound startlingly loud in the confined space. The thumping intensified. The overhead dome light, though switched off, began to flicker erratically in my peripheral vision. Tapping the switch did nothing. I cleared my throat, muttered something incoherent just to break the spell, my own voice emerging thin and reedy. Fatigue, mechanical failure, or was the road itself unwell? After the 7th or 8th pass of the crooked sign, resolve hardened. This cycle had to be broken. Slowing, I guided the car onto the gravel shoulder. The engine idled, a low purr. The vibration lessened but persisted, a faint, nagging pulse. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hazard lights engaged. Their blinking red seemed feeble, swallowed by the darkness behind me. Looking back, I saw no road surface, just an inky void. Park engaged. Breath stuttered. Opening the door, the interior light flickered violently before steadying. I stepped out, the cold air biting at my bare arms. I stood, scanning. Headlights cut a swathe ahead, illuminating the shoulder, a patch of asphalt. The dead tree stood sentinel in the near distance. The crooked sign waited 100 yards further. The fallen pole lay beyond, on the opposite side. Profound silence, broken only by the sighing wind through unseen roadside grass. Then a whisper, faint, insidious, not the wind. Plural, voices soft and sibilant. The skin on my neck prickled. I scanned the darkness. Nothing. The whispers grew slightly, coalescing, though words remained elusive. Drawn by a morbid curiosity mixed with mechanical necessity, I moved to the front, fumbled with the hood release. My hands shook as I lifted the heavy panel, propping it open. The engine bay looked utterly normal. No smoke, no acrid smells, no leaks. Components were warm to the touch, orderly. Then a sharp, distinct tap from deep within the engine block, as if something struck metal from the inside. I recoiled, arm hair bristling, my mouth turned to dust. Carefully, I lowered the hood, letting it latch shut. Turning back towards the driver's door, ready to retreat, the whispers returned. Closer now, chillingly distinct. A single, breathy voice, tight with hidden tension. "Don't look behind you." I froze, heart slamming against my sternum, the pulse thundering in my ears. Instinct screamed to turn, to confront the source. I fought it, focusing fiercely on the door handle, a small point of reality in the encroaching nightmare. The whisper repeated, more insistent, "Don't look behind you." Fear, metallic and sharp, flooded my mouth. Sweat beaded on my forehead, my legs felt like water. I remained facing the car, the highway behind me an abyss. The hazard lights pulsed yet cast no reflection back there. It was a wall of black. The whispers eddied around me, seeming to come from all directions at once, yet I held my ground. Leaning in, I wrenched the door open, slid inside, slammed it shut, locked it. The engine still murmured, dash lights glowed reassuringly. I gripped the wheel, gasping for air, mind racing. My eyes stayed locked forward, refusing the treacherous allure of the mirrors. The phrase echoed, a chilling mantra. "Don't look behind you." Eventually, foot pressed the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires crunching gravel, then smoothly regaining the asphalt ribbon. Hazard lights off. Driving straight, eyes fixed on the headlight beams. The vibrations returned, stronger now. Heavy knocks against the floorboards directly beneath my feet. Each jolt rattled my teeth. My foot trembled on the pedal. The urge to check the rearview mirror was a physical itch, clawing at my resolve. A fleeting glimpse in the side mirror caught something? A flicker of movement, indistinct, gone before I could focus. Chest tightened, grip deathly firm on the wheel. Predictably, inevitably, the dead tree materialized on the right. The crooked sign loomed ahead. The fallen pole lay waiting to the left. A sob of pure frustration escaped me. Escape, that's all I craved. The speedometer hovered at 60, yet the landmarks repeated with maddening fidelity, a psychic treadmill. The clock showed 4:22 a.m., then 4:23, 4:24. Time marched on, but the road remained infinite, recursive. The fuel gauge, that impossible sentinel, held steady near half. Legs weak, mouth parched, I pushed the accelerator, yet progress felt illusory. The knocks from below became erratic, rapid bursts followed by unnerving pauses. Each impact felt personal, a blow aimed at my sanity. Teeth clenched, jaw aching. Fear was a suffocating blanket, but stopping again was unthinkable. Stopping invited the whispers. I couldn't bear them again. Daylight, other headlights, a mundane exit sign. These became symbols of salvation. Sweat plastered my hair to my temples. The darkness outside seemed to thicken, pressing in, dimming the headlight beams. Were my eyes deceiving me? I blinked hard, leaned closer to the windshield, straining to pierce the oppressive gloom. The road unspooled, endlessly familiar. Tree, sign, pole, the sequence immutable. No variation in the roadside grass, no shift in the texture of the night. The sky remained a moonless, star-dusted shroud. risking the briefest flick of my eyes to the rearview mirror. Only blackness stared back. My own reflected eyes flashed wide with terror. Did something shift in the back seat? A shadow within shadow. Gone. Ears pounding, breath ragged. Forward again. Vision blurred momentarily. Neck muscles screamed from the tension. I tried consciously to relax, but the fear held me rigid. Heart raced, stomach churned. The clock ticked past 5. 5:15 a.m., 5:30, 5:45. No lightning in the east, no promise of dawn. Just the relentless highway, the steady engine, the defiant fuel gauge. Swallowing felt like sandpaper on my raw throat. Lips cracked. Tree, sign, pole. How many times? The count was lost, meaningless. Vision swam, eyelids leaden, but stopping was not an option. Fear of the whispers, fear of that consuming darkness behind, fear of what waited on the shoulder. It propelled me onward, trapped, caught in a temporal eddy, a geographic loop. I gripped the wheel, pressed the accelerator harder, a desperate attempt to force a change, to break the pattern. The car surged forward, and there they were again. Sign, tree, pole. The knocking beneath grew frantic, matching my speed, a furious drumming against the floor. A dull ache bloomed in my chest. Every fiber of my being screamed with tension. I struck the dashboard again, a guttural sound tearing from my throat, swallowed by the empty cabin. Then, unmistakably, the whisper slithered back into the car, intimate, right beside my ear. Don't look behind you. Eyes forward, chin high. Peripheral vision registered nothing, yet the presence was undeniable, raising gooseflesh, tightening my scalp. The heartbeats felt like they might rupture my eardrums. Focus, keep the car straight, stay in the lane, resist. The words repeated, overlapping, rising and falling like a tide of dread. How does this end? Drive, just drive. Hope for sunrise, hope for an exit not born of this nightmare. Clothes damp, head throbbing, the insistent knocking of physical assault. But the engine ran, the fuel held, and the loop continued. Tree, sign, pole, whispers swirling. Fear had reached a new plateau, a constant thrum beneath the skin, eyes locked ahead, ignoring the void in the mirror, ignoring the primal urge to see what hunted from the darkness behind. The only plan left, drive, and never, ever look back. The memory remains indelible. The first night that peculiar cadence reached my ears. 1 o'clock ticked past midnight, the hour when the world outside holds its breath. I occupied my cramped station, a little office tucked away near the ground floor's rear corridor, adrift in the building's profound hush, save for the incessant hum bleeding from the fluorescent tubes overhead. Then, abruptly, slicing through the stillness, a distinct tread on the floorboards directly above. Not hurried nor languid, but measured, rhythmic, insistent. A tremor seized my spine, my breath hitched, shallow in my chest. Motionless, I strained to listen, wrestling with the notion that my tired mind was conjuring phantoms. Yet the footfalls persisted, a steady percussion lasting perhaps 30 seconds before dissolving into the quiet. A frantic check of the security monitors yielded nothing but agitated snow, a screen full of dancing static where an image should have been. That was merely the overture. My name is Silas. For nigh on 2 years, I've been the nocturnal custodian of this aging commercial edifice. Once, during daylight hours, it pulsed with the lifeblood of offices and modest enterprises. But a steep rent hike the previous year bled it nearly dry. Now only a scattering of tenants remain, most locking up by 6 or 7 in the evening. Come midnight, the entire structure stands cavernous and vacant, barring myself and occasionally a few stragglers burning late oil in the second-floor shared workspace, though even they typically vanish by 10 or 11. After their departure, solitude becomes absolute. Loneliness rarely troubles me. Companionship isn't my default state. The shift commences at 9 post-meridium, concluding at 5 ante-meridium. My duties trace a simple repeating circuit: patrol each level, verify locked doors, ensure no vagrant soul has sought refuge within the usual guardianship. My command post is a small desk within an alcove off the main lobby, where banks of monitors display the building's vacant eyes. Nights previously dissolved into the blue light of phone apps or the consumption of disposable online articles. But since the advent of the footsteps, a persistent tension thrums beneath my skin. It happened again the second night, closer to 12:30. I'd just completed my second sweep of the building's echoing floors, procuring a lukewarm coffee from the lobby's humming automaton. I retreated to my sanctuary. Mere minutes elapsed before the sound returned. That familiar, deliberate tread, this time seemingly emanating from the third story. A clammy dampness pricked my forehead. Coffee abandoned, I rose, flashlight beam cutting a path ahead, and ascended the stairs. Each riser felt weighted, my own steps unnaturally heavy. My heart hammered against my ribs, breath accelerating. Upon reaching the third floor, I found absence. The corridor stretched empty under the stark emergency lighting. My flashlight probed every recess, scoured the vacant restrooms. Nothing. The silence up there was absolute, profound. Back in my office, I rewound the security feed. Every camera on the third level displayed corrupted signal, a blizzard of static precisely during the interval I'd heard the sounds. All other cameras on every other floor remained crystal clear. That was the first undeniable inkling that the surveillance system itself was compromised by this phenomenon. Through subsequent nights, the footfalls grew bolder, more frequent, always post-midnight, sometimes 12:15, sometimes nearer to 1. Their apparent location shifted, now faint as if traversing the far end of the uppermost corridor, now startlingly proximate, so close I'd brace for a figure to materialize past my open doorway. Each occurrence spurred me into action, a frantic check of the implicated area, always culminating in the same emptiness, and always the corresponding camera feeds dissolved into visual noise the moment the sounds began. I attempted rationalizations, electrical interference, the groans of an old structure settling its bones. Buildings do creak, settle, sigh in the night. But these were no random protests of timber and steel. These were footfalls, distinct and sequential, possessing an unnervingly steady pace. A pattern began to emerge. A short burst of walking, a pause, another burst, another pause. It felt disturbingly akin to someone methodically patrolling the hallways, mirroring my own rounds. Sleep became elusive after a week of this nocturnal rhythm. Daylight hours found me sprawled in bed, replaying the emptiness of those corridors, the spectral echo of steps reverberating in my mind's ear. My supervisor, when I ventured to mention it, dismissed my concerns as fatigue, the byproduct of too many solitary hours. I ceased reporting it. This enigma, I resolved, was mine alone to unravel. One night, driven by a need for validation, I positioned my phone on the third floor, aiming to capture audio evidence, proof against my own fraying sanity. I placed it centrally in the corridor, initiated recording, and descended to wait. Around 1, the familiar tread commenced overhead, precisely on the third floor. I waited, nerves taut, until silence returned, then sprinted upstairs to retrieve my device. Playback revealed 30 seconds of normalcy. Then the screen went black, the audio devolving into a piercing, high-frequency whine, precisely coinciding with the phantom footsteps. A knot tightened in my gut. The phone had been flawless moments before. Battery full, ample memory. Yet the recording had self-destructed at the critical juncture. A few nights later, resolve hardened within me. I would confront this presence, whatever its nature. Near midnight, I began my rounds as usual, but deviated, pausing in shadowed alcoves, listening intently, hoping to provoke the phenomenon while I was already present on the same floor. Initially, nothing. I ascended, reaching the second level, positioning myself near the dormant elevator shaft, waiting. Then, above on the third floor, the footsteps began. Adrenaline surged. I bolted up the stairwell, bursting onto the third floor landing. The tread ceased instantly, every muscle clenched. The beam from my flashlight quavered, betraying the tremor in my hands. I swept the light across the void, empty. A wave of dizziness washed over me, my legs suddenly weak. Forcing slow, deliberate breaths, I fought for composure. I drifted towards the corridor's end, pressing a hand against the chill expanse of window pane. Below, the street lay shrouded, punctuated only by the hesitant flicker of a distant street lamp. Occasional headlights sliced the darkness, offering no solace. Turning, I surveyed the corridor once more. Utter stillness reigned. Descending the stairs towards my office, a thought coalesced, sharp and unwelcome. The pattern, the sequence of the footsteps. It struck me then, they often seemed to mirror the trajectory of my own patrols. First floor, second, third. My own routine varied, sometimes top-down, sometimes bottom-up. These spectral rounds also progressed sequentially between floors, though not always shadowing my immediate direction. A chilling suspicion bloomed. Perhaps they weren't just random sounds, but an echo, a mimicry of my own presence, offset by some unknown interval. As more nights bled one into the next, the footfalls undeniably drew nearer to my ground floor haven. Initially confined to the upper reaches, they descended to the second floor directly overhead. Then, inevitably, I began hearing them in the very corridor leading to my office door. By the time the tread manifested in the hallway just beyond my threshold, raw panic clawed at my composure. Each time they sounded so close, I'd sit paralyzed, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, eyes fixed on the doorknob, anticipating its turn. It never moved, but the footsteps would pause directly outside, as if someone stood there, listening before receding. One evening, I resolved to capture the elusive glitch itself. Phone poised, I aimed it at the monitor displaying the corridor just outside my door. Around 12:45 a.m., the anticipated steps began on the ground floor. My phone recorded as the monitor's image flickered violently, then collapsed into a roiling sea of gray static. Simultaneously, the footfalls amplified, seeming to pass right by, though the screen showed only noise. Then silence. A second later, the static cleared, revealing the empty, indifferent hallway. Reviewing the phone's recording, I saw it. Corridor, then chaos, then corridor again. The audio track captured the footsteps, but warped, distorted almost beyond recognition, like a corrupted digital file. I saved the evidence, but it offered no illumination, only deeper mystery. Weeks bled into a month of this unnerving ritual. The prospect of work instilled a visceral dread. My supervisor observed my increasingly frayed state, but I deflected, citing generic stress. He proposed a switch to the day shift, a tempting offer marred by a pay cut I couldn't afford. So the nights remained mine. I took to keeping a radio playing softly in the office, a fragile bulwark of mundane sound against the encroaching silence. It offered scant comfort, the distinctive cadence of the footsteps sliced through the background noise whenever they commenced. One night, undertaking my rounds earlier than usual, around 10:30, hoping to secure the building quickly and retreat behind my locked office door, a hypothesis crystallized. As I checked a second-floor supply closet, it struck me. The footsteps always seemed to replicate the previous night's patrol route. A test was imperative. That night, I deliberately fractured my routine, visiting the fourth floor first, then descending to the first, ascending to the third, finishing on the second. A random, illogical sequence. The following night, precisely as I'd suspected, the footsteps began on the fourth floor, moved to the first, then the third, then the second. The confirmation landed like a physical blow, heavy in my chest. My heart rate surged. There existed no earthly explanation for such a thing. It threw the very nature of reality into question, yet I clung desperately to a semblance of calm. Armed with this disturbing knowledge, my patrols became strategic experiments. I began leaving subtle markers. A waste bin shifted inches from a wall, a sliver of tape affixed to a specific floor tile, observing if they were disturbed. Occasionally, I'd find the markers return to their original positions, though I never witnessed the act. The cameras remained useless allies, reliably dissolving into static whenever the footsteps manifested. On one particularly taut night, near 1 a.m., the tread sounded on the third floor, descending. It moved along the second-floor corridor directly above me. Then, the unmistakable sound of steps on the stairwell, leading down to my level. I positioned myself beside my office door, flashlight extinguished, holding my breath, striving for utter silence. My pulse hammered in my temples. The footsteps reached the corridor's end, paused for several heartbeats. I remained frozen. Then they resumed, heading back towards the stairs. Relief washed over me, cold and sharp, laced with an indefinable dread. Keys rattling slightly, I locked my office and followed, maintaining a cautious distance, fear warring with a desperate need to understand. My own rubber soles scuffed faintly on the linoleum as I tried to move without sound. The footsteps ascended to the second floor. I trailed them up the stairs. Just as I reached the landing, they abruptly ceased. I scanned the empty corridor. Nothing. I stood there for a long minute, breath ragged. Methodically, slowly, I checked each office door along the hall. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the sensation of being watched prickled the hairs on my arms. Eventually, defeated, I retreated to my office chair, staring at the bank of clear, silent monitors. No further sounds disturbed the profound quiet that night. I spent the remaining hours wrestling with the impossible. The only conclusion that felt remotely congruent with the evidence was that some intangible presence was mirroring my nightly passage through the building, but the why and how remained utterly opaque, deepening the pervasive unease I could no longer shake off. By the following week, I was operating on sheer nerve. I exhausted every possibility, scrutinizing the electrical grid, the aging ventilation system, prying at loose floorboards. No mundane explanation surfaced. I even cautiously queried the few remaining tenants about nocturnal disturbances. A couple acknowledged hearing noises, but had always attributed them to me, the night watchman, making my rounds. No one else seemed remotely perturbed. The isolation of my experience felt absolute. The breaking point arrived during a midnight patrol of the second floor. I moved with heightened senses, listening, waiting. Then below me on the first floor, the footsteps began, but different this time. Not the usual measured pace, but quicker, urgent, ascending the stairs towards me. I froze mid-corridor, flashlight gripped so tightly my knuckles ached white. The steps reached the second floor landing, paused. Instinctively, I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. Then they advanced towards me, step by deliberate step, matching the exact rhythm I myself employed when traversing this specific hallway. A vice clamped around my chest. My own heartbeat roared in my ears. Spinning around, I fled towards the nearest stairwell leading down. I scrambled back to my office, slammed the door, fumbled with the lock. On the monitor, the corridor camera dissolved into static. When the image resolved, the hallway was empty, but the footsteps sounded directly outside my door. My hand shook so violently I dropped the flashlight. It clattered loudly on the floor. As I stooped to retrieve it, flicking its beam back on, the footsteps receded, moving away down the hall, and then silence. They were simply gone. Now each night unfolds under this shadow. I anticipate the commencement of the footsteps. I track their progress, log the times, watch the monitors faithfully glitch into oblivion. There seems nothing else left to do. No one is ever visible, yet the tread faithfully retraces my path from the night before. They always seem to draw closer, yet the mechanism, the purpose remains shrouded. I only know that when midnight approaches, every nerve ending sings with tension, attuned to the slightest murmur in the building's vast emptiness. This is my reality now. I continue the vigil, bound by necessity, by the need for a paycheck. But I cannot escape the chilling certainty that something walks these halls alongside me, an unseen echo bound to my routine. And with each passing night, devoid of answers, all I can do is listen, document, and fight the rising tide of panic whenever I hear the sound of my own solitary footsteps reverberating in an empty corridor. There exists a species of silence indigenous only to the deep timberland, a hush unlike the restorative quietude one might seek. It's a stillness stretched taut, an expectant emptiness, as though the very air holds its breath. That particular silence descended the night the world tilted off its axis for me, Elias Thorne. Solitude in the wilderness was my usual balm, you see, but this excursion felt different from the moment I chose my site. A secluded pocket carved deep within the forest's heart. leagues from any marked trail, utterly alone. Just myself, the whispering conifers, and the cold scatter of stars. That was the arrangement I craved. Late summer reigned. Daylight hours retained their warmth, yet the nights had begun hinting at autumn's chill. My canvas shelter rose in a modest clearing adjacent to a dense stand of pines, a sanctuary seemingly excised from the known world. No signal bars, no digital tethers. Perfection. The initial day unfolded without incident, foraging for fallen limbs, securing the camp, tracing game trails that ribboned through the undergrowth. As dusk bled across the sky, a modest fire crackled, its smoke marrying the pungent perfume of pine needles drifting on the cooling air. It was only when the sun relinquished its final hold, plunging the woods into deepening chiaroscuro, that the peculiar stillness began to assert itself. The fire, now a constellation of embers pulsing softly, offered little comfort against it. At first, dismissal came easy. Nocturnal forests invariably mute their daytime chorus. Yet this was absolute, a profound cessation. No scuttling leaves, no thrumming insects, not even the distant cry of a hunting owl. An acoustic vacuum had formed, swallowing the familiar world whole. A disquiet, cold, and insidious slithered up my spine. I chided myself. Isolation's phantom touch. How many nights had I spent thus, companionless beneath the trees, fearless? But this pervading hush felt sentient, hostile. It prickled my skin. I poked the embers, coaxing a brief, defiant flare before they settled once more into their soft, watchful glow. The surrounding trees loomed, immense and skeletal, their branches etching fluid hieroglyphs in the unsteady firelight. The distinct sensation of being observed tightened its grip. Ridiculous, I scoffed inwardly. Just the woods. Only me and the ancient indifference of nature. Still, the feeling persisted, a primal itch I couldn't scratch, compelling furtive glances into the impenetrable blackness beyond the fire's reach, searching for an unseen, unnamed presence. By the time I retreated into the tent's thin membrane of security, the air had acquired a distinct bite, and the silence had somehow intensified, grown heavier. Zipping the flap felt like sealing a tomb. Sleep, however, remained elusive. Each time my eyelids fluttered shut, the conviction returned. Something lingered just outside, poised, waiting. Hours must have passed in this liminal state before oblivion claimed me, only for a sound, movement definite and nearby, to wrench me violently back to awareness. I sat bolt upright, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, a moment suspended in sheer listening. Had I dreamt it? The forest held its breath, unnaturally quiescent, then, unmistakably, a faint shush, the drag of something navigating the leaf litter just beyond my clearing. My hand, trembling, found the torch, fumbled with the switch. Its beam sliced the interior dark, throwing stark, elongated shadows onto the nylon walls. I held my breath, straining to parse the sound above the frantic thrumming in my ears. There it was again, a slow, almost measured rustling, followed chillingly by the distinct scrape of something brushing against the tent fabric itself. My throat constricted. I froze, every muscle rigid. This was no nocturnal foraging creature, none I recognized. The movement possessed a deliberation, a controlled stealth that bespoke awareness, intention. Whatever lurked outside knew I was within. Drawing a ragged breath, Attempting to quell the rising panic, I eased the zipper down a fraction, creating a narrow slit through which to peer. The fire was long dead. The campsite plunged into profound darkness. The torch beam swept nervously across the trees, illuminating only empty space, the immutable stillness of the forest. Yet the feeling remained, potent and undeniable. Something was there, concealed just beyond the light's fragile perimeter, watching. For an eternity, it seemed, I remained crouched, half exposed, torch clutched like a talisman, sweeping the Stygian gloom for any flicker of motion. But the sound did not repeat. The woods lapsed back into their unnerving silence, and the sensation of being watched gradually began to recede, though it never entirely dissipated. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime compressed into minutes, I persuaded myself it had been benign. A falling branch, perhaps. A fox or a badger rustling through the bracken. Nothing more sinister. I resealed the tent, lay back upon my sleeping bag, but sleep was a shattered mirror. Every sigh of wind through the pines, every tiny creak or rustle, sent jolts along my nerves. I lay there, eyes wide in the suffocating dark, listening to the vast, unblinking silence, waiting. I must have succumbed to exhaustion eventually, for the next conscious perception was of pale morning light filtering through the canopy, the air softened by the nascent sun. The world outside looked deceptively ordinary, tranquil even. A wave of foolishness washed over me. My own imagination, amplified by solitude, had conjured the night's terrors. Emerging from the tent, stretching cramped muscles, I surveyed the campsite. Everything lay undisturbed. The cold fire pit, the scattered cooking implements, my rucksack leaning against a mossy log. Then my gaze fell upon something that turned my blood to ice water. Tracks, faint yet starkly defined in the dew-dampened earth, leading from the shadowy tree line directly to the side of my tent. They were not the prints of any woodland animal. They were too large, their shape unnervingly, unmistakably human. A cold dread clenched my gut as I knelt, tracing their path with horrified eyes. The impression circled the tent completely, a deliberate perimeter check, before retreating back into the dense woods from whence they came, vanishing as if the walker had simply dissolved into the foliage. My mind spun, grappling with the implications. Who could possibly be out here? Miles from anywhere, no trails nearby. And if someone had been present, why the stealth? Why simply observe? A creeping, visceral terror spurred me into action. My hands shook as I crammed gear haphazardly into my pack. The simple act of breaking camp transformed into a frantic escape. I needed to leave, now. The hike back towards the distant promise of my car was a fugue state of hypervigilance. Trees that yesterday offered shade and solace now felt like grasping claws, their shadows elongated, menacing. Every snapping twig, every rustle of unseen life in the undergrowth shot adrenaline through my system. I felt nakedly exposed, the sensation of being stalked clinging to me like forest damp. When the blessed sight of my vehicle finally emerged through the trees, I practically threw the pack into the rear, scrambling into the driver's seat. My heart still pounded erratically as the engine coughed to life, tires spitting gravel on the rudimentary track. One last involuntary glance into the rearview mirror towards the trail's maw, and that's when I saw it. A figure. barely discernible amidst the dappled gloom at the forest's edge. Tall, unnaturally slender, its features lost to shadow. It stood utterly motionless, a silent sentinel, its unseen gaze fixed upon me. No gesture, no sound, just absolute stillness. I didn't linger to decipher its intent. My foot slammed the accelerator, the car lurching forward, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. I drove without pause, fleeing down the winding track until the familiar asphalt of the highway appeared, swallowing me back into the mundane world of noise and traffic. What presence haunted those woods that night? What intelligence guided those silent footsteps? I cannot fathom. Its purpose in watching me remains a chilling enigma. I have never returned to that part of the wilderness, and now, whenever the thought of camping flickers, however briefly, the memory surfaces cold and sharp. The suffocating silence, the footprints, and the unshakable conviction that somewhere deep within those shadowed trees, something still waits and watches. His eyes, captured in the monochrome flicker of the security feed, were the first discordant note in the night's weary rhythm. A chill, sharp and unwelcome, snaked down my spine. Something glacial resided in that stare, a predatory stillness that promised this shift would unravel far from the ordinary. As the digital clock bled digits towards midnight and the final straggler drifted out into the sodium-lit emptiness, a stark certainty crystallized. I was on the cusp of being sealed in this glass box with a man who had woven himself into the scenery, a man whose departure felt terrifyingly unlikely. 6 months I'd haunted the graveyard, hours at the Horizon Quick Mart. For a student like me, Elias, it was passable. Long stretches of silence punctuated by the caffeine-starved or the post-revelry munchie hunters. Ample quiet for textbooks. The store itself clung to the town's ragged hem, a lonely outpost flanked by a slumbering gas station and a perpetually simmering diner. Not exactly prime territory, but it kept the lights on in my cramped apartment. Tonight began steeped in the mundane. 10 p.m. saw me relieving Finn, the evening sentinel. We enacted the familiar liturgy: cash drawer reconciliation, inventory glances, the low murmur of retail rights. Finn, pulling on his jacket, mentioned the night's sluggish pulse typical for a Tuesday. "Oh, and keep sharp, Elias," Finn added, pausing at the threshold. "Got a guy who's been orbiting for a bit. Buys little things every hour or so. Probably nothing, but you know, eyes open." A nod was my only reply, the warning dissolving into the background hum of the coolers. We had our share of loiterers nursing lukewarm coffees, thumbing through magazines with glazed eyes. As long as coin crossed the counter periodically and peace prevailed, their presence was tolerated. An hour or so slunk by before he truly registered. He was adrift in the snack food canyon, contemplating salted versus mesquite barbecue with an intensity that felt theatrical. On the monitor, his movements possessed a deliberate, almost rehearsed quality that snagged my attention. Tallish, maybe mid-30s, hair shorn close, a shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. His attire, jeans, dark jacket, scuffed work boots, screamed anonymity, yet his eyes, even filtered through the grainy surveillance lens, they held a disturbing focus, a weight that made my skin prickle. Eventually, the chips made their pilgrimage to my counter. Proximity amplified the disquiet. A smile stretched his lips as he paid. A brittle facade that never reached those watchful, assessing eyes. "Slow one," he observed, his voice unexpectedly soft, incongruous. I offered another mute nod, suddenly distrustful of my own voice. Change clinked into his palm. I willed him towards the door, towards the indifferent night. He remained rooted. Those eyes drilled into me. "Work here much?" he inquired, the empty smile still pinned in place. "Now and then," I murmured, feigning absorption in the meticulous arrangement of chewing gum packets. He lingered, a statue carved from unease, before finally pivoting and melting back into the aisles. The breath I hadn't known I was holding escaped in a shaky sigh. The ensuing hours saw this strange ballet repeated. He'd roam, select some trivial item, approach the counter, attempt conversation laced with unsettling intimacy. With each cycle, the knot of anxiety in my gut tightened. My gaze became magnetically drawn to the security screens, charting his quiet, purposeful meanderings. Midnight drew near, leeching the store of its few remaining patrons. Silence settled thick and expectant. Soon it was only him and me. He stood sentinel by the magazines, feigning interest in glossy covers, but the pressure of his stare was a physical sensation against my back. A frantic debate sparked within me. Call the manager, the police? But what ammunition did I have? A customer was unnerving, buying things, talking. Paranoia would be the verdict. Besides, policy dictated. My phone remained entombed in my backpack in the cramped office out back. 11:55. He drifted towards the counter once more, hands empty this time. "You know," he began, leaning casually against the Formica. "Always wondered about this night shift gig. Must get pretty solitary." My throat constricted. Swallowing felt like forcing down sandpaper. "It's fine," I managed, the words thin. "We get decent traffic usually." A chuckle escaped him, hollow, devoid of warmth. "Oh, I've been observing. Not much traffic tonight, in fact." A glance at his wristwatch, precise and deliberate. "I'd wager you're about to be quite alone." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I felt sure he could perceive. The clock face glowed. 11:58. 2 minutes. "Actually, sir," I forced out, striving for a steady tone, "we close right at 12. I'll need you to complete any purchases now." His smile widened, a predatory baring of teeth. "Oh, I don't believe so. No, I think I'll linger a while. You and I, we have things to discuss." His hand moved towards his jacket's interior. Time warped, stretching thin. This was it, the flash of steel, the cold muzzle. My absurd end here amongst the slushy machines and lottery tickets, because I'd second-guessed the primal scream of my own intuition. But what emerged wasn't metal. It was leather and burnished gold, a badge. "Detective Kalin, City Police," he stated, the shift in his bearing instantaneous and absolute. The unnerving smile vanished, replaced by grim purpose. "Afraid I need you to lock these doors ahead of schedule, son. We have a developing situation." I gaped, my thoughts tumbling, struggling to reassemble reality. What? He scrubbed a hand over his face, a flicker of weariness crossing his features. Apologies for the charade. We had credible intelligence suggesting this location was being utilized as a drop point. Narcotics trafficking. Observation without spooking the players was paramount, but we just got confirmation. We need to move now. As if summoned by his words, motion bloomed beyond the plate glass. Headlights extinguished. Several indistinct vehicles ghosted into the lot. Figures clad in dark tactical gear began to disembark, swift and silent. "Wait," I stammered, voice trembling. "You mean this whole time?" Detective Kalen nodded grimly. "We've been watching the entire operation, not just you. Couldn't risk blowing cover until we were certain. Sorry if I unsettled you. Maintaining the illusion was critical for anyone else potentially watching." My legs turned to water. I clutched the counter, knuckles white. "So, what happens?" "Now," he said, his gaze steady. "You lock up. Then you accompany me to the station. Need a formal statement, anything you might have noticed, anything suspicious during your shifts." Mechanically, I moved to secure the doors, my mind a maelstrom. All those nights oblivious. How long had I been inches from danger, an unwitting cog in their machine? Kalen seemed to register my spiraling thoughts. "Hey," his voice softened fractionally. "You're clear. No trouble for you. You're a witness. We'll ensure you're safe." Numbly, I nodded, following him out into the suddenly crowded night, towards one of the anonymous vehicles. As we pulled away, more police cruisers converged on the horizon Quickmart, their flashing lights painting the scene in stark, urgent strokes. It promised to be a long night. At the station, under the flat fluorescent glare, I recounted months of seemingly insignificant details. Odd transactions, faces that didn't fit, hushed conversations cut short by my approach. The truth unfurled. Mr. Albright, the store's owner, a man I'd met only once, was the operations architect. The convenience store, a mere stage prop for a sprawling network dealing in poison. Dawn was bruising the eastern sky when I finally stumbled home. I fell onto my bed, utterly spent, yet sleep remained elusive. The night replayed itself relentlessly, the icy tendrils of fear, the whiplash of relief, the staggering weight of the revealed truth. In the subsequent days, the story saturated local news. Yellow tape crisscrossed the doors of the darkened horizon Quickmart. More interviews with detectives followed, culminating eventually in courtroom testimony. I never returned to the nocturnal world of retail. The experience left scars, a heightened suspicion, an aversion to lingering customers, a permanent jumpiness, but it etched a vital lesson onto my psyche. Trust the unease. That prickling intuition had been right, just aimed at the wrong shadow. Years have passed. Sometimes the memory surfaces. The chill of Kalen's gaze across the counter, the sudden shift from predator to protector. It serves as a stark reminder of proximity to genuine peril, not from the man playing a part, but from the unseen malignancy I'd unknowingly served. So should you find yourself bathed in the fluorescent glow of a late-night convenience store, perhaps offer a fleeting thought to the solitary figure behind the register. Unseen dramas often unfold just beyond the glow. And if a feeling whispers that something is fundamentally wrong, listen. That quiet voice might be the most important sound you ever hear. My home, once a bastion against the world's uncertainties, had become the very source of my disquiet. Night after night found me lying taut in the darkness, straining to decipher unpredictable sounds, steeling myself against moments that defied expectation. When I first decided to offer my spare room to strangers online, I envisioned backpackers breezing through, perhaps quiet tourists seeking temporary lodging. Never did I conjure the reality, a silent, unnerving presence that seemed never to depart. A perpetually locked door betraying no ingress or egress, and ponderous footsteps echoing in the dead hours when sleep should have held sway. My name is Elias. I lead an unremarkable existence, dwelling alone in a modest two-bedroom house perched on the town's periphery. My days are spent working a perfectly adequate job at the local hardware emporium. Several months prior, seeking to bolster my modest income, I listed the spare room online. Most occupants were ephemeral, unremarkable figures, arriving with luggage, staying a handful of days, then vanishing as unobtrusively as they arrived. Complications were rare. Then, one crisp late autumn afternoon, a figure materialized on my doorstep. He was tall, yet possessed a certain gauntness beneath his long, somber coat. In one hand, he clutched a meager satchel. Nothing immediately struck me as overtly peculiar, save for the conspicuous absence of a name offered. Cash, the precise rental fee, was thrust forward, his gaze resolutely fixed somewhere past my shoulder, like pools of shadow refusing light. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, controlled monotone confirming a 4-night tenure. I merely inclined my head. My query about necessities was met with a single, curt shake of his head, words seemingly rationed. An awkward tension thickened the air. Attempting to dispel it, I mentioned the Wi-Fi credentials, the idiosyncrasies of the front door lock. He mumbled something akin to understanding. I escorted him to the guest room. It was compact but comfortable enough. A single bed, a small writing desk, a simple wooden chair, immaculately clean. I watched him toss the satchel onto the desk. His eyes swept the room with an unnerving stillness. Still nameless, he offered nothing further, and I felt reluctant to press. "Should you require anything," I offered, retreating into the hallway, "please let me know." I lingered there a moment, anticipating the usual sounds of settling. A drawer opening, a cough, perhaps footsteps. Only silence emanated from behind the closed door. A profound, unnatural quiet. Typically, guests rustle belongings, inquire about local eateries, not him. By the dinner hour, the realization dawned that I hadn't detected him leaving the room, nor had a single sound breached the door's impassive barrier. It remained shut tight. Unwilling to seem intrusive, I refrained from knocking or calling out. I assembled some leftovers in the kitchen, ate while scrolling through my phone, my attention repeatedly snagged by the clock, anticipating the door's eventual opening. It never stirred. Around 11, I retired for the night. The corridor light cast long, probing shadows. The guest room door stood as a dark, silent rectangle. I assumed he slept, yet the utter lack of sound, no snores, no shifting weight, felt wrong, gnawing at my composure. My own bedroom lies directly opposite. Faint noises usually traverse the narrow hall. Tonight, there was only a vacuum. Sleep offered little refuge. Around 2 in the morning, the silence shattered. A grating, scraping screech sliced through the stillness. Furniture, heavy furniture, being dragged across floorboards. It originated from the guest room. Then came the footfalls, ponderous, deliberate, unnervingly rhythmic. For several minutes this continued. I lay rigid, eyes fixed on the oppressive blackness above, trying to rationalize the disturbance, rearranging the sparse furnishings. At this ungodly hour, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. My mind raced. Why push the bed, the desk? The sounds persisted, sharp against the quiet house, then ceased with jarring abruptness. Silence rushed back in, heavier, more laden than before. I eventually succumbed to fitful sleep, pursued by unsettling dreams of my own furniture inverted, defying gravity. Dawn arrived gray and uncertain. I rose early, an irresistible pull drawing me to the hallway. The guest room door, closed, immutable, offering no clues, no sign of egress during the night, no sound from within now. A hesitant urge to knock warred with a rising tide of apprehension that constricted my chest. I departed for work, the enigma of the locked room casting a pall over my thoughts. Returning late that afternoon, I found the situation static. The door remained shut, the silence profound. My curiosity intensified, yet it was tempered by a growing instinctual caution. That profound stillness felt less like privacy and more like concealment. I ended up preparing a simple supper of scrambled eggs and toast, lingering in the kitchen, hoping absurdly that the aroma might lure the hermit from his self-imposed confinement. He never materialized. The second night proved worse. I sought my bed around 10, noting again the guest room door, precisely as it had been all day, sealed tight. Near 1, the dragging sounds erupted once more. My chest tightened reflexively. Remaining in bed felt impossible. I slid out quietly, crept to my bedroom door, and eased it open a fraction. The hallway lay bathed in the faint, low glow of a nightlight. The scraping was louder here, closer, punctuated by a resonant thump that vibrated through the floorboards, making my heart hammer against my ribs. I stood frozen, gaze locked on that impassive door, breath held, anticipating some violent eruption. It never came. The noises persisted for a few more minutes, then ceased as suddenly as before. No further footfalls, no final scrape, just silence. Leaning against the door frame, breathing shallow and fast, my mind churned through possibilities, shifting the bed for warmth, retrieving something dropped. Yet the sheer intensity, the nocturnal timing felt deeply unsettling. Most people would offer an apology for such a disturbance. The following morning, my resolve hardened. I would knock, demand some sign of life. Before I could act, however, my eyes caught something on the hallway floor. A small scrap of coarse black fabric lay just before the guest room threshold, as if it had somehow slipped from beneath the door during the night. I picked it up, the texture rough between my fingers. Bending low, I pressed my ear against the cool wood, listening with fierce concentration. Nothing. Utter stillness. A faint tremor ran through me. My mouth felt unnaturally dry. I knocked softly. Silence answered. Waited 10 seconds, then knocked again, louder this time. No response. "Hello?" I called out, my voice tight. "Everything all right in there?" The The void swallowed my words. Tentatively, I tried the doorknob. Locked, solid, unyielding. A bead of sweat traced a path down my neck. This had tipped from eccentric into genuinely weird. Thoughts of locksmiths, even the police, flickered through my mind, but uncertainty held me back. He had paid for 4 nights. This was only the morning of the 3rd. Perhaps he valued extreme solitude. Still, the nocturnal commotions. I told myself I'd grant it one more day. If the silence persisted, I would take action. Work was a blur of distraction. My thoughts remained tethered to that locked door, that unnerving quiet. My supervisor remarked on my lack of focus. I mumbled an excuse about a headache. Returning home felt like approaching a potentially volatile situation. The door, predictably, was still locked. Nothing had visibly changed. The scrap of black fabric I'd left on the kitchen counter remained exactly where I'd placed it. No indication he'd emerged for any reason. I prepared another solitary meal, my gaze constantly drifting towards the hallway. I felt like a sentry guarding an empty post. Exhaustion eventually claimed me. I drifted off on the sofa around 9:30, the television murmuring forgotten dialogue into the quiet room. Sometime deep in the night, after midnight had passed, I jolted awake. Heavy footfalls sounded overhead. A cold impossibility seized me. My house possesses no second story, merely a shallow, inaccessible crawl space beneath the roof. My heart began a frantic hammering against my ribs. I killed the television's drone and listened, straining into the darkness. The footsteps ceased. A profound silence settled. With immense effort, I forced myself off the sofa and moved towards my bedroom. I left the hallway light burning, a flimsy, irrational shield against the encroaching dark. Reaching my room, I did something unprecedented. I shut the door and engaged the lock. It felt necessary, vital. I got into bed fully clothed, every nerve taut, senses hyper-alert. The house offered its usual nocturne of clicks and creaks, but no distinct footsteps. Eventually, against my will, I drifted into an uneasy, shallow sleep. Then, abruptly, I was wrenched back to consciousness. The sound was unmistakable. My own bedroom doorknob was turning. Slowly, deliberately, a faint click echoed as the lock mechanism yielded. The hinges emitted a long, agonizing groan as the door began to swing inward. My heart seized, then exploded into a frantic rhythm. My throat constricted, stealing my breath. In the dim wash of light spilling from the hallway, I couldn't discern details. Only the growing darkness of the opening gap. A shape loomed beyond it. I was utterly frozen, trapped between terror and disbelief. My hands clenched the bedsheets, a frigid dread washing over me. Slow, heavy steps sounded on my bedroom floor. Closer, then I heard breathing, ragged, labored, as if drawn through coarse sand, unnervingly close in the darkness. A strangled whisper escaped my lips. Who's there? My voice trembled uncontrollably. No answer came, only the continued rasp of that difficult breath. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. Every muscle screamed for action, leap up, defend myself. But fear held me pinned, a leaden weight. My hand, shaking violently, fumbled towards the phone on the nightstand. My fingers spasmed on the screen, accidentally activating the flashlight. For a fleeting, stark second, its beam sliced across the room, illuminating a tall silhouette, broad-shouldered, swathed in a dark coat. Startled by the sudden light, the figure recoiled sharply. I heard the rapid retreat of footsteps, and then my bedroom door slammed shut with violent finality. I lay there, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, the phone's light still wavering in my trembling hand. It had to be him, my guest. But how? How had he bypassed his locked room and breached mine? My mind spun, unable to grasp the logistics, overwhelmed by the violation. Scrambling out of bed, I flicked on the overhead light, bathing the room in harsh clarity. I rushed to the door, wrenched it open. The hallway stretched empty before me. The guest room door stood closed, impassive, as if nothing had transpired. But as I stared, I heard a faint, distinct click from behind it. My hand shot out, tried the knob. Locked. Again. My skin felt clammy with cold sweat, my own breathing loud and harsh in my ears. Sleep was utterly annihilated. I remained awake for the duration of the night, all the lights in my bedroom blazing, staring at the door, half expecting its return. Nothing further happened until the first weak rays of dawn bled through the window, bringing a measure of relief mingled with profound exhaustion. My mind was made up. This situation required decisive action. I resolved to call a locksmith if the occupant refused to answer. Privacy concerns evaporated. I would not tolerate someone roaming my house at night, entering my locked room without explanation. Around 7 that morning, I pounded on the guest room door, my voice firm, laced with residual fear and newfound anger. "Hey, I need to talk to you right now." Silence greeted my demand. I tried again, louder, striking the wood harder. Nothing. Resigned, I called a locksmith, offering a simple explanation. I was locked out of a room within my own house. It took him roughly an hour to arrive, a short, older man in a nondescript gray uniform. I spared him the bizarre details, merely indicating the recalcitrant door. With practiced efficiency, he employed his tools, manipulating the lock. After a couple of minutes, a final click sounded, and the door swung inward. My stomach twisted into a knot of dread and anticipation. The room was empty. It appeared fundamentally as I had left it for the guest, yet violently disturbed. The single bed was shoved haphazardly into the far corner. The small desk lay overturned, its legs pointing accusingly at the ceiling. The wooden chair rested on its side. The dresser had been dragged inexplicably to the center of the room. Scuff marks scarred the floorboards, testament to the forceful rearrangement I'd heard in the night. On the rumpled bed lay the guest's satchel. It was open and utterly empty. No clothes, no toiletries, no personal effects whatsoever. My brain felt overloaded, struggling to process the scene. Where was he? The window, I noted with a jolt, was securely locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry or exit. The locksmith offered me a puzzled, questioning look. I pressed his fee into his hand, and he departed without further comment, perhaps sensing the strangeness he'd rather not engage with. I stepped fully into the room, moving cautiously, checking under the bed, behind the displaced dresser, inside the small closet. Nobody. He was simply gone. I couldn't fathom how he had exited, or where he might have vanished to. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. My heart still raced erratically. A sudden, overwhelming wave of relief washed over me. He wasn't here. Immediately followed by profound confusion. How could a person disappear from a locked room? Then I noticed something else. The closet door bore distinct scratch marks near the handle, thin gouges in the wood. as if someone had clawed at it, trying to pry it open from the inside. I pulled it open, empty save for a few wire hangers, rattling faintly and a layer of dust on the shelf. But a faint, stale odor clung to the confined space, the unmistakable smell of old sweat and anxiety. A shiver traced its way down my spine. I picked up the empty satchel from the bed, turned it over, shook it. Nothing fell out. It was completely barren. No name tag, no identifying labels. The pockets inside were torn, ragged, no wallet, no ID, not a single clue to his identity. Had he intended to leave it behind? A deliberate void. The utter lack of sense was maddening. After several minutes of fruitless searching, I carried the empty bag out to the trash bin at the end of my driveway and threw it away. The remainder of that day passed in a state of hypervigilance. I stayed home, waiting, listening, half expecting him to reappear as inexplicably as he had seemingly vanished. He never did. I still possess no explanation for how he departed that room, nor how he navigated my house at night, culminating in the terrifying intrusion into my own locked bedroom. That evening, I changed the locks on both my front and back doors. I drove nails into the frame of the guest room window, sealing it shut from the inside. I meticulously checked every corner of my house again, searching for hidden passages, loose vents, anything that might explain his movements. My house has no basement, no easily accessible roof space. He had simply dematerialized. Despite his physical absence, I couldn't shake the oppressive feeling that his presence lingered, an unseen residue. That night, I dragged a small dresser in front of my bedroom door before finally attempting sleep. I kept a heavy flashlight clutched on the pillow beside me. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, brittle. Every creak of the old house jolted my eyes open. It has been some time now since those 4 nights. Needless to say, no one else has occupied my guest room. Sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, when the house settles into profound quiet, I think I hear it again. The faint scrape of furniture, the echo of heavy footfalls in the empty hallway. I leap from bed, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, ready to confront an intruder. But the hallway is always empty. There is never anyone there. The worst part, the part that replays itself behind my closed eyelids, is the memory. The slow, deliberate turning of my doorknob in the dark, the agonizing creak of the hinges, and that rasping, labored breath filling the silence. I can still feel a phantom chill on the back of my neck when the room is utterly still. I remain ignorant of who he was or why he chose my home for his unsettling stay. I cannot comprehend his nocturnal migrations, his ability to remain unseen until that final terrifying encounter. And I will likely never understand how he vacated a securely locked room, leaving behind only chaos and an empty bag. But one thing is irrevocably clear: those nights fractured something within me, altering my perception of this house. It no longer feels like my sanctuary, my small, safe corner of the world. Instead, it feels subtly occupied, tainted by a presence that lingers despite his departure. Now the doors remain double-locked, and each night I wedge a sturdy chair beneath my bedroom doorknob, a small, perhaps futile ritual against waking ever again to the sound of those heavy, inexplicable footsteps drawing near.